Good morning. Good morning. And welcome to the 24th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Local Authorities, Service Commissions, and Statutory Authorities, including the Tobago House of Assembly in the 12th Parliament. Today's public hearing is being convened pursuant to our inquiry into the operations of the Adoption Unit of the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, as it relates to the efficiency and effectiveness of the adoption procedures in Trinidad and Tobago. We are pleased to have with us today officials from the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago and the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs Division. Good morning, all. So I now invite you to introduce yourselves, and we will follow up with that. From the Children's Authority, sorry. So will the members of the Children's Authority do so?
Sheldon Cyrus, Director of the Children's Authority.
I notice your chairman is not here. We expected him.
Yes, I have to apologize for the chairman. He is accompanying the minister at the launch of an event, an initiative really, for the Child Abuse and Prevention Month. So he really wanted to make it and try to make alternative arrangements for another board member, but it did not work out. So we apologize for that.
Thank you. Will you convey our disappointment at his absence, please?
Yes, please.
And the members of the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs Unit.
Good morning, Chair and members. My name is Vijay Gangapasad, Acting Permanent Secretary, Gender and Child Affairs.
Hello, good morning. Sanjay Singh, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Gender and Child Affairs.
Okay, we also have from the Children's Authority, Mrs. Vandana C.U. Sankarali, General Manager, Child and Family Reintegration Services.
Good morning.
And Ms. Renee Neptune, Adoption Manager, Acting.
Good morning.
Good. Thank you very much. I am Suniti Maraj, Chairman of this committee, and with me today are, would you introduce yourselves, please?
Good morning. Esmond Ford, Vice Chairman of this committee.
Morning, Lawrence Islop, Member.
Okay, thank you very much. So we get to the objectives, more specifically, of this inquiry. To assess the operational efficiency of the adoption unit of the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, to assess the effectiveness of the adoption unit in the facilitation of adoption procedures in Trinidad and Tobago, and to evaluate the adequacy of the regulatory framework that guides the work of the adoption unit in the execution of its mandate. So I now invite the Children's Authority representative, yes, Mr. Cyrus, to make a presentation on their work, not exceeding 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Ms. Suniti Maraj, Chairman of the JSC, Mr. Esmond Ford, Vice Chairman, members of the Joint Select Committee, Mr. Vijay Gangapasad, Permanent Secretary, Gender and Child Affairs Division, Office of the Prime Minister, staff of the Children's Authority, members of the national community, good morning. Thank you for giving the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago the opportunity to contribute to this discussion on the adoption process. While fundamentally adoption is a legal process, it is about determining the suitability of the prospective adoptive parents to appropriately respond to the social, emotional, physical, and educational needs of a child. The ethos of the authority is that children thrive best in a family environment. Therefore, all efforts are made to keep children with their families or to seek family reintegration where possible, appropriate, and in the best interest of the child. However, there are times when these are not possible, and other placement options for the child may include kinship foster care, or adoption. According to the Adoption of Children Act, no person other than the authority shall make arrangements for the adoption of a child. Therefore, we take this responsibility seriously as we seek to place a child in a safe, loving, caring, nurturing, and permanent home with a family where the child can feel loved and have a sense of belonging. We hope that during our discussions today, we provide more clarity on the work of the adoption unit to the satisfaction of the JSC and the wider community. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call on Mr. Vijay Gangapasad, Permanent Secretary Acting in the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs Division.
Thank you, and good morning again to Chair, members of the committee, colleagues, and the viewing audience. Firstly, I want to thank the committee for the opportunity to be part of this inquiry. The Gender and Child Affairs Division affirms that child rights and responsibilities remain a national priority, including their right to be raised in a family. We hold the position that all children, including those who cannot be in their biological family, should be in families who can love, care, and protect them for the long term. For this, adoption is always the preferred option. Where this cannot be done, for whatever reason, we advocate for other options like foster care, kinship care, and other types of in-family arrangements. The role of the adoption unit within the Children's Authority cannot be overstated. It serves as the bridge between vulnerable children in need of loving home and prospective parents eager to provide that love and stability in a child's life. Institutions and processes addressing varying issues pertaining to children are regarded as critical elements of a robust child protection system. As societies evolve, we recognize the need for and are committed to continuous improvement. It is for this reason we consider this inquiry an opportunity, not only to share information, but also to benefit from insights and recommendations that will allow for greater numbers of children to grow up in loving, nurturing, and stable homes. Today also provides a priceless opportunity for all of those listening in to learn about adoption and the adoption processes. There are children awaiting the warmth of a family, a loving family, yearning for the stability and security that only a permanent home can provide. Your decision to embrace adoption can transform lives and shape futures in ways unimaginable. So I urge you to open up your hearts and homes to the idea of adoption. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So we will get on now to the questions. I would like to remind everyone to address their questions through the chair. And we will start with some questions to the Gender Affairs Unit based on your submissions to us. Member Hislop.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, let me recognize the work that the Adoption Unit and the Division of, or the Gender Affairs Division has been doing for our children. And we know all of this takes significant funding. So I just want to touch very quickly. Your submission would have shown that there's been an increase to the Children's Authority consistently over the last 3 years, from 86 million to 132 million, based on your submission. The question is, to what extent has this increase in budgetary allocations been commensurate with the increase in releases to the Children's Authority? And has this increase affected your operational efficiency?
Chair, through you, to answer the question, over the years, the division has advocated for increases in the allocation for the Children's Authority. And this is primarily based on submissions and looking at the authority over the years to encourage greater efficiency in its operation. In terms of the releases, the Children's Authority would have been receiving their releases on a timely basis. As it relates to how that money is utilized when it is released, the Children's Authority would be in a better position to provide an explanation for that.
But based on the allocation, there is a commensurate in the increase in the releases. So your allocation is one, but in terms of the releases. So if you allocated 132 million, how close to that do you get in your releases?
Thanks again, Chair. Through you, the releases is usually equal amounts based on what is received on a monthly basis.
Okay, and from your position, acting PS, it translates into more resources being allocated in terms of what the Children's Authority requires. That translates into that, right?
Yes, it does. I think that, on an annual basis, we do have discussion with the authority on what their needs are in terms of human resources and otherwise. They would have been signaling over the years the need for additional resources. In 2023, we actually had a joint meeting with the authority and with officials at the Ministry of Finance. At that meeting, the Minister of Finance was there, and a firm commitment was made by the Minister of Finance, through the Ministry of Finance, to increase the allocations to the authority based on several processes that would have been conducted at the authority, including a transformation exercise that they would have done and projection that they would have done in terms of what is required to make the authority more efficient and more effective in terms of human resources and otherwise.
And my final question to this, Chair, is that PS, you have seen, and I don't know if the adoption unit could jump in on this, but you've seen that has benefited your increase in allocation, the releases to the unit, has benefited the operation of the adoption unit.
Through your chair, yes, the releases have benefited the authority, the adoption unit and the authority by extension. So your question regarding allocation as compared to releases, these figures have actually been released to the authority, and we have seen commensurate increases in our ability to do what we have to do. Thank you.
We brought up that particular aspect. The vacancies that exist presently, are they as a result of remuneration packages? What's the reason behind because you're saying that, yes, you got releases, you asked the Minister of Finance to provide the releases, the ministry provided to the authority. The vacancies that exist, are they as a result of financial concerns? We talk about the psychologists, we talk about caregivers. Somewhere it's stated, like for instance, your adoption manager, there's a vacancy right now, I understand.
Yes.
What are the reasons? Is it as a result of the financial aspect of the vacancies, or is it otherwise?
No, it's not the financial. We are at a point of transitioning the organization into a new structure. And if you notice, we did provide the current structure as compared to the new structure. So we are in the process of going through a review of all our operations, and we will be transitioning during the course of this fiscal year into that new structure that you see there.
I just wanted to get that clarified, Madam Chair.
Okay, Mr. Saros, what was the allocation for this year?
The allocation for this fiscal year was $100 million.
That's a drop, a reduction from last year, which was 132.5 million.
Well, the 132 was the accumulation of not only the initial allocation, but also a revision based on mid-year review for last year. So we anticipate that for this fiscal year, while we started off with what is a lower figure than the actual for last year, it is higher than the initial allocation that was made for last year, if you were to compare it. So at the end of this fiscal year, we anticipate that our actual releases would likely surpass the 132 that we received last year.
Well, you're very optimistic, because I would have thought if your actual releases last year were 132 million, you would not get less than that this year, knowing what the past has been, immediate past. Can I ask you, what would have been the initial request in terms of the Children's Authority's financial needs? I'm aware that we are doing an overview here before getting into the heart and soul of the adoption unit. But how much would you have requested from the minister for this year?
It would be 150 million.
All right. Well, I'm hopeful, as you are, that it will be a bigger sum than 132 million then. Okay, so a question I have for the acting permanent secretary. Is it? Yeah, the permanent secretary. Your submission indicated that the Board of Management approved the implementation of the kinship foster care and the foster to adopt policies. Can you give us some more details about that? They seem to be new innovations in the process, and your timeline for implementation, and in terms of where you are in that process.
Thanks very much for the question, Chair. These are two relatively new policy arrangements at the Children's Authority. Kinship, foster care, and my colleagues may be able to also provide some insight. It is really to allow family members to be able to foster children. As it relates to the foster to adopt policy, it even started some advertisement and awareness campaign on that. I myself saw brochures that were inserted in a person's mailbox highlighting some of these initiatives and inviting persons to come forward. As it relates to the foster to adopt policy, I know these things are already approved policy and are being implemented at the authority.
Is there someone else in your team who would like to expand?
Well, Chairman, I would comment, and I would invite my colleagues to expand on it. You see, given what we had mentioned earlier, the authority always seeks to try to keep children as much as possible with family members. So even if the immediate family members may not be appropriate, we have always sought the assistance of extended family members. And the kinship foster care arrangement, which we have been promoting, seeks to allow members of the child's family, extended members, to become foster parents. So that is a recent drive of the authority. I will invite my colleagues to give further comment with regard to the foster to adoption pathway.
Before you go into that, can I ask if you, in that process of trying to keep children within a family where there may be problems in the family, difficulties, do you work closely with the Ministry of Social Development and Family Affairs?
Yes, we do.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you for your questions. And so just to preface, both policies are hinged on the idea of permanency planning. So we at the authority place heavy emphasis on ensuring that children always have a plan for where they can be permanently placed within a family-based environment. So with kinship foster care, as my CEO explained, and PS, we actually are in the process of implementing, and we currently are well along our pathway to that. We currently have 10 kinship foster care providers that have been approved, and I apologize, and 10 children that have been placed with those kinship foster care providers. As it relates to the foster to adopt policy, that is a policy that seeks to ensure first that a child who is in foster care, who may be a candidate for adoption, can transition into adoption, and it governs all the procedures involved in that. And then it also speaks to a foster carer who wishes to become an adoptive parent. That policy addresses how that process is governed as well. And that is currently being implemented.
So I could see the second, a child is with a foster family and they develop a relationship and they want to make it a permanent relationship, both sides. But in terms of the kinship, what kind of supports, assuming there are any, that are given to relatives? Is that a part of the policy?
Absolutely. So we have, first of all our foster carers, whether they are traditional foster carers or kinship foster carers, receive training to become foster carers so that they are equipped with the skills to be able to meet the child's needs. In addition to that, we provide a stipend, a foster care stipend that is afforded to the kinship foster carers so that they can meet the financial needs of the child in their care.
How much is that stipend?
It's based on a range. So we have a range of $2,000 for basic needs, and it moves all the way up to $5,000 depending on the complexity of the needs of the child. Other forms of support involve provision of psychosocial interventions that the child as well as the foster carer might need. So that involves individual counseling, specialist assessments, other specialist interventions. If the parent, the kinship foster carer, as well as the parent or guardian, because we are always working back towards reintegration if that is in the best interest of the child, if they need interventions as well to help them come up to speed, meaning individual counseling, if they need housing assistance, if they need assistance signing up for other types of grants, this is the parents in particular, the authority provides and networks to allow for those supports to come into place.
Madam Chair, thanks for the opportunity. So in the framework, let's picture a scenario, all right? Mother is deceased, father is alive, and the father now wants to get that child back into his care, right? Is it that the authority would give preference to the father versus foster care for other individuals? How rigid is the procedure? Because, there would have been some reason why in the first instance the child would have ended up in some sort of care prior to now the father wanting to get back the particular child. Let's give us a little synopsis on how that will work, how rigid you will work. Is it that the father will get the first option or what? Let's explain to us, please.
Sure, through the chair. We always ensure that any persons who express interest to care for a child undergo a very thorough suitability assessment. So if a parent presents themselves, their situation, themselves, any person associated with them, their home conditions, all of these will be investigated to ensure that they are suitable. If they are suitable, then by all means, placement can happen, and of course, taking into consideration the wishes of the child as well. If they are not suitable, then we would look to other persons, first and foremost in the family environment, in the social circle, and if we can't find persons who are suitable by doing all of those suitability assessments, then the child can be placed. If not, then we look into alternative care systems.
And one other question, Madam Chair. And if the father is declined, could he then seek redress via the courts of Trinidad and Tobago?
Through the chair, yes. Any person who wishes to provide care for a child and believes that they are suitable, they can, and the court is the final decision maker in relation to decisions like this.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Just a follow-up, Chair. Who's the entity that performs the investigation to determine the home that the child goes to or the parent is suitable?
Through the chair, it is the Children's Authority. And if there are other key stakeholders that are working already with the family, then we will also work with those stakeholders to collaborate and ensure that we are on the same page.
Okay, so we'd like to move now to some other question that has to do with the procedure, and so on. So we've got some of your submissions from the Children's Authority. on the number of children at different stages of the adoption process. One missing piece of information, I don't think we may have asked for it, but in terms of applications, I want to get an idea of how big is the pool of applicants, and to what extent is that when you get down to the actual children who are in the stage of being adopted or have been adopted, what percentage that may look like over any given period of time. And also, if you could describe the process, the workflow as it were, with an idea of how long, in your experience, and not your experience, but the data would show, each element of that process takes, from application to vetting, I imagine. Well, I would leave it to you to tell us what the process looks like. Should I ask Mr. Cyrus for that, or would you like one of your...
Yes, I'll ask
The manager?
Van Anna to
Okay.
respond to that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so with regard to the applications, your question about the applications, Chair, can you just clarify for 1 second? My head is into the second part of your question. What was
Okay,
your
so what
question?
I'm getting at, do you have a huge demand
Right,
from
yes.
the public
Yes.
to adopt children? And how is, and because the figures we have are about how many adoptions are pending and how many have actually been completed, and I want to know what that looks like in relation to the pool.
Okay, yes. So I can actually cite data that we have from the period 2015 to 2024 currently. And in terms of applications, we've received 535 applications for adoption over that period of time. And in terms of adoption orders that are finally granted, we have, for the same period, 124 adoption orders that have been granted. Now, some of the adoption applications, in terms of explaining the discrepancy between there, some of them would have dropped off, some of them who might have said, over time that they no longer wish to pursue. Others would have been the ones that have been approved. Others would have been the ones that may not have been approved, and they would have had to go to the court for themselves if they wished to take it further. There would also be the situation where we have open and closed cases within that. So by open, we mean the child is already within the care of the adoptive parent. So they have applied to formalize that arrangement. And so those tend to be, we have 226 out of the 535 I mentioned. Those were the adoption applications that we received. And 309 are the closed cases. And a closed case it's an application where you don't have a child in your care and you've asked for a child to be placed with you. All right, so that's the statistics that we have so far. I will turn you over actually to my colleague, Ms. Neptune, to speak through the process and the timeframes.
Good morning, everyone, through the chair. So with regards to the process and the timeframes, I will explain that. The process from submitting the application to us, we have seen now, prior to 2021, it took approximately 1 to 2 years before this application could have been assigned to a caseworker for it to be processed. Now, due to the implementation of some new processes within the unit, an application can be assigned to a caseworker in real time. So as we receive an application, most of the times now, we can assign it to a caseworker for them to begin working on it immediately. That process takes approximately 6 months for the application to be completed and processed by the caseworker. Internally, it takes approximately 3 months for us to do our internal processes, and this is the psychosocial process. It deals with conducting interviews with the prospective adoptive parents, conducting home visits, school visits if a child may be in the care, those sorts of things. The other time accounts for external factors, such as persons having to apply for a police certificate of character, which can take a month, just over a month. It depends sometimes on if the system is working or not. Persons having to receive their medical forms back, their blood works, those sorts of things. Also, for a foreign case, a foreign application, we have to take into account the time for these persons to undergo their investigations in their home country, as well as to receive approvals for immigration and citizenship. So that may push back the time frame by a bit, but overall, it has been taken under a year for an application to be completed. With regards to the pool, yes, there is a high demand in terms of persons who want to adopt. As my general manager indicated, we do have 89 applications in queue, and all of these are with caseworkers and being processed presently.
What are the qualifications of a prospective adopted parent?
Through the chair. So for the prospective adoptive parents, we ensure that holistically they're able to provide care for a child. So medically, physically, they have the familial support, not just the familial support, they have the finances to provide for this child, as well as a home that is safe, sound. So we do home visits to ensure that, the community, the home itself is adequately equipped to care for this child. So within the process, they would have to provide for us their financial information, the medical information, which requires chest x-rays, blood works. They would also have to provide background characters. So in terms of background checks are completed on them by their four family members, any other members within the household, as well as community checks are carried out by our service providers.
Do you have conditions such as whether the person is single, in a cohabitation arrangement, or is married? Do you have an age, boundaries, young and older? And do you have income, stated figures? Do you have any issues with religion or sexual orientation of the prospective adoptee?
Through the chair. So yes, we do have single persons can adopt if there are persons cohabitating. Their partners are also part of the process. So we do ensure that even though the main applicant goes through the process, the partner also goes through our psychological assessment, security background checks, those sorts of things. In terms of the age limit, there is no age limit. However, all applications are to the discretion of the adoption committee. So once a case is processed and taken to the committee, all these things will be reviewed. In terms of the finances, there is no specified limit on finances. However, applicants are required to submit their financial statements to us, which is also reviewed. Any other sources of income is also taken into consideration. With regards to sexual orientation, there's no discrimination. Again, all applications are processed and everything will be taken to our adoption committee where it can be reviewed and discussed.
Just a follow-up on, you spoke about a service provider that carries out the background checks. Would you be able to provide us with the name of the service provider and what is the service provider's skill set? How did you come about that service provider doing a background check on whether a couple has the ability to adopt? And when the chairman spoke about single persons being allowed to adopt, you spoke to a partner. Is it legally single, or if I am a single male or a single female, I'm living alone, am I allowed to adopt? I have another follow-up, but we could work with those two for now.
Through the chair, so our service provider who carries out the background checks, it is Amalgamated Security Services. They were sourced by our procurement departments, but within the sourcing of this background service provider, they would have met with the unit to discuss the needs and the requirements and the stipulations of this investigation.
So if I could just interject, Chair, I have a challenge with a security company doing a background check in order to determine. So what is it? Could you share the criteria that the security company uses to do the background check?
Sure. So in terms of conducting the background checks, they would usually interview as well, briefly, the prospective adoptive parents. They visit the home. They conduct community checks. So the applicants would provide references to us, and we interview references, as well as the background. The company would also carry out community checks where they speak with neighbors who can attest to the character of these prospective adoptive parents.
Through your chair, we need to appreciate that the security firm does not get involved in the psychosocial type checks, right? Those types of checks are done by the authority. So the security firm will do more of a security background check and verify certain things for us. But our professionals will do the psychosocial type checks because it's a holistic process. Because at the end of the day, the emphasis is the best interest of the child. So all these checks come into one space, which will be the unit, the adoption unit, and then it goes to the adoption committee. So it's not that the security firm is solely responsible for doing every bit of the check. They do security background checks, which is necessary, just like we have to get police certificates of character. But in terms of the psychosocial checks, those types of elements, the authority would do those types of checks and follow-up visits.
And Chair, as it relates to the single individual.
Through the chair, yes, a single male or a single female can adopt.
Could you share with us how many adoptions were not granted, and what do you think would be, not think, but what, based on your statistics, what would be the main cause for an adoption not being granted?
Sure. So for the time period since proclamation to present, which would have been 2015 to present, we have only had approximately 2 adoptions which were not granted. Reasons for this: in one instance, we would have found that the individual did not have enough familial support, as well as finances, as well as a stable income to provide adequate care for that child. So the application was not approved, but the individual was given the opportunity, or has been given the opportunity, and some time to see if this can be stabilized before reapplying. In the second instance, the legislation speaks to us obtaining consent from the birth parents, right? Interviewing the birth parents and obtaining consent to relinquish their parental rights for the adoption to continue. In this instance, one of the birth parents was not in support of the adoption, and he would have indicated the reasons why. Further investigations were conducted, and it was taken that a recommendation was made to the adoption committee, and the committee would have agreed that given the nature of the information shared with us and the person's interest to still be a part of the child's lives, the matter would not have been granted.
Would that, the parent who objected, would that parent take responsibility for the child? Child moves in with that parent?
So through the chair, we are very hopeful of this. Within the interviews, one of the things we do ask birth parents, if they are not willing to support the adoption, what is your next step? What do you have in place to provide care for this child? How would you now be involved in this child's life moving forward? So that's one of the areas that the parents did highlight to us that they wish to follow through on in terms of developing a relationship with the child, as well as trying to develop that bond, more visits, provide financial support, those sorts of things.
You paint to us the ideal scenario. In all of this, based on the child's age, does the child have any say or aspect of making a choice?
Through the chair, that's a very good question, because yes, so in the best interest of the child, as well as dependent on the child's age, but once the child has an understanding, the caseworkers are mandated to explain what is adoption to this child. We ask them to explain it to us again to make sure that they actually understand what is the process they're going through. We ask them what are their thoughts on this, what are their views on the adoption, if they're comfortable with it, if they're comfortable with the persons who are going to adopt them. We do seek to inquire what is a typical day like, what is their general lives like with these adopters. So yes, the children do have a big say in the process, and we do take that into account.
And what age group that adoption process will go up to? The age of the child?
17, until 17, yes.
All right. And this coming back, Madam Chair. We talk about, getting some consultancy service outside by Amalgamated. Looking at your org chart, right, we identify probably about 273 individuals, right, in terms of it being there. And then you have your various departments, adoption, assessment, child family services, and child justice, and so on. So as Mr. Cyrus mentioned, internally, you will see about the psychosocial aspect of everything, and then you will use consultancy outside. But in terms of that professional aspect, can that not be provided within the particulars and your human resource planning in terms of what you have present in your organization?
Through you, Chair, the psychosocial, yes, but in terms of the security background checks, we really will prefer that to be done independently. So that is why we would source an independent firm to do the security background checks. But the psychosocial, we will do it internally.
Could you, again, Madam Chair, an aspect on a yearly financial cost, average, that will be paid out to the particular security company accordingly? That's an average cost per year or per month, depending on the demands.
I don't have that specific figure with me, so I could provide that figure.
In writing, yeah.
Yeah,
right?
so I can provide that figure in writing.
I can't remember your name, my apologies, but I think you would have indicated that if a parent is willing to be in the child's life, that you would not go ahead with the adoption process. Could the adoption unit, even though a parent is willing, could the adoption unit make a determination that the parent does not have the ability, whether it's financial or otherwise, to take care of this child? Do you have that authority to do that? And if you do, how do you legally remove the child, and I use the word remove very guardedly, from the care of this parent who shows an interest in the child?
Through you, Chair. Thank you for the question. Yes, if the parent is still willing to be a part of the child's life, we have seen that in our investigations, parents do indicate that they're willing to be a part of the child's lives. We give them a chance, we give them time to follow up and do some of their actions, and they don't follow through. Based on the Adoption of Children Act, Chapter 4603, there are grounds within the legislation on which the unit can make the recommendation for dispensation of the parent's consent. And this will be in terms of if they have abused the child, neglected the child, they are not contributing to the upkeep of the child. And these will have to be supported by our continuous investigations, which are also reviewed by our legal unit to ensure that we do have sufficient grounds to make these recommendations for dispensation.
How long would it take, or in your experience, how long would it take for you to get from that stage to where you're indicating?
Through the chair, I'll take this question just because it really depends on a case-by-case basis. Each family is different, and in some cases, a family may need, or a parent may need quite a bit of support to give them the opportunity to come up to scratch, and to work with them. Remember, adoption is termination of parental rights. It's a very extreme method. And so before we get to that point, we do want to give parents the opportunity to become better, to be rehabilitated, to give them the chance to do so. So depending on the commitment shown by the parent, the interest shown, the wishes of the child as well, the history, it can be a short process, or it can be a lengthy time that we are working with that family. If we're seeing progress, that we really want to work with them to help them get to the point. But there does come a point where you have to make a decision, and at such point in time, as Ms. Neptune said, we can and we do have the recourse to dispense with consent if we're seeing that your inability to provide for your child and your inability to give consent is holding back the process.
So getting back to the process, you're in a mode of transformation and transition at this moment. And you've talked about the improvement in the length of time. You've cut it down significantly. So what would you say, if one were to apply today, all other things being equal, how long does the process take, and compared to previous to this new dispensation, as it were?
Thank you for that question, Chair. So I would say from the time from submission of application to the processing of the application to have that person approved, it can take approximately 6 months. In previous times, it took approximately 1 to 2 years.
And a lot can happen in that 2 years in terms of the development of the child, right? So we have an idea of applications, about 500 and something at the current time. How many children are available at this time for adoption in the country?
So presently, we have approximately 9 children who are in different stages of the process to be freed for adoption. We do have 2 sibling groups of children, older children, the first being a sibling group of 4 with ages ranging from 13 to 8 years old, the second being a sibling group of 2 whose ages I believe are 12 and 13 years old, who are already freed for adoption and are waiting matches. However, what we have realized is persons really do not wish to adopt older children, hence the reason that they are still within the community residences. A lot of persons wish to adopt babies or toddlers, very young children. We have been in our sensitization sessions, informing the public that there are older children who can also be adopted and are in need of a loving and caring home. We do have 3 children who are in the process of being freed for adoption to subsequently be matched with persons who have been approved on our list.
Go to places like homes for children. Those children are not, they're not with their parents, they're in the care of the state, as it were. Those children are not available for adoption.
Correct. Those are the children within the community residences. Through the chair? Yes. So those children are not...
I'm talking about places like St. Mary's, Jaya Lakshmi, and so on.
Yes, thank you for that clarification, Chair. Yes, so those children, they are not available for adoption. What we do, and we have been doing, and we are in the process of doing, is we have a community residences reintegration project that is currently ongoing, where a team external to the caseworkers within the unit have been in these community residences conducting investigations, liaising with the managers and caregivers of these homes to determine children who can be possible candidates for adoption. Keeping in mind that this is a legal process, we have to conduct these investigations. We are presently in the second phase where our internal team is searching for birth parents. So not all of these children in the community residences have family members, parents. Some of them, we don't have a last known address, we just have names. So we're in the process of trying to locate these persons so we can conduct our interviews to determine if they are candidates for adoption. A lot of them are older children, but we are still working with them because far and few in between, we do receive applications for older children, and we are working with them. Some, yes, or I can't say for all because we would have received possibly some names or some addresses for family members. It is now on us as part of the process to try to locate these persons, to speak to them, to interview find out their views on the child being adopted, being freed for adoption and placed with a family.
Okay, I don't know, Member Ford has a question, but can you give me an idea of the size of that population?
Sure, Chair. So we would have identified 125 children who can be possible candidates for adoption. That was in the first phase. In the second phase, now that we have been doing the investigations, our list is presently at 73 children.
Chair?
Tell me something. So the pool of children for adoption, where they come from?
Through the Chair, the pool of children, they can come from community residences. So these same children that we're working on this project now, some of them can go on to being freed for adoption, or if a birth parent or parents come to us indicating that I would like to place my unborn child for adoption, or it can already be a child that they have in their care that they are unable to care for and they would like to place for adoption. It can also be children who may be abandoned in the hospitals, and referrals from the hospitals have come to the authority informing us that this child is abandoned and we think that adoption may be in the best interest of the child. The necessary investigations would be carried out. Also, we have open adoptions, as Mrs. Siyosanka Ali explained before. Open adoptions, let's say an aunt wants to adopt their niece or nephew that they have been caring for, they can apply to adopt this child.
And additionally to that, you mentioned of having siblings, whether 3 or 4 the case may be, and within a particular age group. In terms of the policy for separation, or they going together for one family, what's the policy with regards to the Trans Authority on that?
So in the best interest of the siblings, we really do not split them up. We have had sibling groups of 4, 3, 2 adopted before, and we try as best as possible to keep these siblings together.
And one other question, because the question I wanted to ask earlier. After the child is adopted into the home, things going fine, what monitoring system do we have in place? Follow up, check back to see what's happening after 6 months, a year, 2 years to see what's happening? Give us an insight of how that operates.
Thank you for that question, through the Chair. So within the legislation, there is no part of it that mandates the authority or the units to conduct post-adoption monitoring. However, in the best interest of the children, and based on the relationship, we really develop a good relationship with our clients, we continue to follow up with them. So when an adoption is completed, the unit still liaises with these families. We still enroll the child. We assist them with enrolling the children into school, into their necessary health centers to ensure that they continue getting an education as well as their medical follow-ups. We also do liaise with them, and they also willingly liaise with us and send us pictures based on their developments, celebration of milestones. So for Christmas times, we do get pictures, first day of school, and we also do, in our liaison with them, should they require any additional support, let's say they may think, or we may think that they need to attend some parenting sessions to, let's say, provide assistance with discipline, those sorts of things, we are able to refer them and provide that assistance, even post-adoption.
Thank you.
Can I go back to the issue of amalgamated? Was that the result of a competitive tender or sole select?
As far as I am aware, that would have been as a result of a competitive tender. But it is a process that is ongoing, so it doesn't mean that that would remain the same, forever. So we constantly would be reviewing these matters.
Okay. There was the issue of foreign adoptions. Are these by foreign nationals or Trinidad and Tobago nationals living abroad, probably married to another citizen of another country? Generally, what are they?
Through the Chair, they are both, but we have seen a lot of Trinidad nationals who reside abroad, and they want to adopt their relatives who reside here, in terms of for them getting better schooling, educational opportunities, or family members, their parents may have passed away and they wish to adopt them, to have them with them. However, we're seeing a slight increase in terms of the international applications being submitted to us as well, but generally it is nationals of Trinidad and Tobago who reside abroad and wish to adopt.
And how are the security background checks done on people who live abroad?
Through the chair. So for their process, it's slightly bit different because they reside abroad. The home study report would have to be conducted by an accredited adoption agency in the state that they live. So we liaise agency to agency. Once they submit an application to us, we reach out to their agency that they have contracted. We inform them of all the things that are needed for the home study, which is the background check, the psychological assessment, the medicals, these sorts of things. We also interview the persons as well, but that agency would supply those to us. They also have to receive approval from Immigration and Citizenship, and a background check conducted by their state as well is also done and submitted to us.
I would just like to go back to the PS, Mr. Ganga Prasad. With regards to your submission, and I quote, "A package of children legislation, including the adoption of Children Act, is being reviewed by a subcommittee of the Standing Committee on Child Protection." And it's based on the comment that was made by Ms. Neptune, right, where there is no legislation in place for them to do any follow-ups. And my question is, can you list the laws which are included in the package of children's legislation currently being reviewed? How often does this committee meet to conduct its work? Who are the members of the Standing Committee on Child Protection? And then if it is that, based on Ms. Neptune's comment, if any of that is being considered with regard to the legislation, which is, the aspect of a mandatory follow-up to know what's happening after these children are adopted. Madam Chair.
Through you, Chair, and thanks for the question. This committee was established in January 2023. The committee meets mainly on a monthly basis. The committee comprises ministers as well as senior officials, deputy permanent secretary, and other persons from several ministries, including the Ministry of Social Development, the Ministry of the Ministry of Youth and the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of National Security, and I would have to outline that further for you in a written submission. And deputy permanent secretaries, the chair of that committee is the minister with responsibility for gender and child affairs. The legislation that are being looked at is the Community Residences, Foster Care and Nurseries Act, the Children's Act, the Adoption Act, the Children's Authority Act, and I think there's one other. Those are primarily, I will look at as well. A subcommittee of the committee they also meet, I think they have a meeting, it's probably this week or next week, to look at submissions that would have been sent out from the various stakeholders, ministry, of suggestions for changes. A number of these changes would have come from the Children's Authority as well as the Division of Gender and Child Affairs. And we have given ourselves a 3-month time frame. We expect to make a submission by the end of June 2024 related to a legislative policy recommending changes to these pieces of legislation. And to answer your question, the answer is yes. Yeah, the answer is yes if the Children's Authority are the operators of the legislation, and if they see that there are changes, and of course, in my opening statement, I did indicate that we would welcome recommendations to strengthen the pieces of legislation that we have, and as well as operational efficiency.
So, I notice you use open in the context of family and so on, but in adoption, open also refers to an open and a closed adoption where the child knows their biological parents and there may be even a relationship in future. Is that something that is used at all here? That is there a policy on that for now? And have you encountered prospective parents and parents who are interested in a more open relationship and even bordering on co-parenting?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, we do not have any policies on the open and closed adoption. This is what we know them as, the open ones, where there's the relationship or the children know who their birth parents are. To answer your second question, I'll tie it in one time. Yes, we have encountered cases where older children, they know their birth parents, but they have grown up with these adoptive parents. They know that they are also their parents. And yes, they all maintain a relationship. So we would have parents informing us that, when is this child's birthday or there's a graduation or some sort of milestone, they maintain that relationship and they are present with them. However, that is separate and apart from the children's authority. So we do inform them that if they, in these open cases, they do wish to maintain that relationship, that is their personal arrangement.
But what about the child's right, or does a child have a right to know at a certain age who their biological parents were?
Thank you, Chair. That's a good question. Yes, within our very first interview with prospective adoptive parents, we do inform them that they have to inform that this child is adopted. We rather that the child hear it from them and rather than from somebody outside. A lot of times, persons inform us that they are willing to have this done and they will do it at a age where the child is at that age of understanding and that they would seek guidance in terms of how this information is shared with the child.
Chair, just to follow up on that, there are also legislative provisions that allow for a child upon coming of age to be able to seek that information about their birth parents and so it is their right if they wish to know about their adoption status.
So do you follow up if a parent gives an undertaking that they will tell the child that they were adopted? Do you follow up to know that when that has been done? And what is is an optimal age at which a child, or is it up to an individual child?
Through you, Chair, we do not have those follow-ups to find out if this has been disclosed to the child that they have been adopted. It's really on a case-by-case basis because we have had persons telling us with younger children, they would have started to ask questions about, they being a bit different from the adoptive parents, and the adoptive parents would have told us, we're thinking about now is a good time to introduce the fact that this child is adopted and to share that with them. We do guide them in terms of receiving any sort of intervention or from psychological service providers on how they can share this information with the child. So each one is on a case-by-case difference. And really depends on the child themselves and what stage they're at.
I see there are many references to psychosocial support, but I notice you don't have a psychologist on board. And so where is that coming from, that kind of support? Sometimes parents need the help. They would just hold on to that information and say, I'll do it next year, I'll do it whatever, and they're going on because they don't know how to decide whether the child is ready, whether it's a good thing or not, right? If a parent, you need that, you need that support. What is happening in the absence of a psychologist, and what is the optimum number of psychologists needed by your unit to deal with that? I'm not going to even ask about the Children's Authority as a whole at this point, but.
In terms of our psychosocial support, the adoption unit is actually staffed by social workers, so they are able to provide certain levels of psychosocial intervention to the parents. We also have psychologists in other parts of the authority as well. So if there is a family or prospective adoptive parent who requires more support than a social worker may be able to provide, we oftentimes can rely on the other psychologists in the authority or the external service providers that we have on board. In terms of ideal, it really is looking at a matchup between demand for the services as well. But we would say on average about 2 to 3 psychologists would assist us in better being able to effectively manage those kinds of demands.
Would you say the population as a whole are aware of the option of putting their children to adoption, as opposed to, well, can't take care of the child, so I'm just not going to be taking care of the child, leave it for somebody else. That they know that adoption is an option, and this is what I do. Because sometimes information barriers is what just make people delay and procrastinate. They probably think about it, they don't know where the Children's Authority is, they don't know how, they might not even know. We often find that we think everybody knows certain things in the country, and you find people just don't know. What is your experience, and would you say that more needs to go on in that area of sensitizing parents, biological parents, to options, and, adoptive parents?
That's a great question, Chair, because that's a huge part of the work that we do at the authority, and particularly within the adoption unit. In doing sensitizations is really important for us in getting the message out, so that we don't end up with children abandoned in hospitals or on the side of the road or in the bushes, but they do know that adoption is an option that they can present their children forward for. So we do sensitizations. We try to do it at hospitals, so that persons, who are pregnant and, maybe in that stage of considering what they want to do, they're aware of those options. We do a lot of sensitizations with stakeholders, and that is actually something that we are looking to build out further this year, in this fiscal year, to be out there and get that message a lot more with our stakeholders who may be working with vulnerable families, so that they can also share with their clients this information. We do a lot of sensitizations within clinics and hospital settings with the staff there as well too, so that they too are equipped with the knowledge to share with the clients as well. We've been doing some public sensitizations in the media as well, so that is helping to get the message out. But we at the authority are always of the belief that more information is needed, and so that is really behind our drive for more sensitizations.
And what is your evaluation of the effectiveness of this approach?
I would say that based on the fact that we've been seeing a constant stream of applications coming in, we've been seeing persons coming forward and bringing their children to the adoption unit, I would say that there is a trend towards improvement. Of course, more can be done, because we still have cases where, persons do not present themselves for adoption, and we hear of those stories and we find out otherwise. But it is improving, and I would say that our continued efforts and ramping up of the sensitization should see us having more improvements in the future.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, to follow up on that same trend of thought, deviant behaviors, is there a trend that you all can identify with regards to the pool of children that you all have for adoption? Are you all able to identify any deviant behavior that may need mentioning at this time?
Through the Chair, just to clarify, do you mean deviant behavior among the pool of children
discipline,
themselves? Yes.
Discipline, bad attitude, just in discipline, is it that there a trend among the pool that you have? The 500, I think that, Ms. Neptune, that's the figure, right? 500, roughly?
Through the Chair, that's the number for the applications.
Right, applications, right? But within the pool, are you seeing
100.
indiscipline, poor attitude,
The pool of children, or
yeah.
the pool of, okay, so it's just
Children.
9 children that we have available for adoption, and so no, those would not be typically what we see. I mean, children who are within the alternative care system have understandably come from a background of trauma or some level of familial dysfunction, and so it is expected that we would see some challenges with behaviors, particularly in older groups of children. However, I would say from among the groups of children that we have currently, I would not say that we have those challenges, but you raise a very important point, because this also speaks to the bigger issue of the child profile that prospective adoptive parents may put forward as the type of child that they may want. And because the majority of persons do ask for younger children, toddlers, infants, you end up in a system where there may be older groups of children who could eventually, through our investigation processes, be identified as candidates for adoption, but not match the kind of child that most people want.
Right.
so.
So again, Madam Chair, right, you would have identified 525 applicants, 124 adoptions that were approved, and then there's a 309 closed cases. Those are the numbers. Out of that particular aspect, not just the 9 that we are talking about.
To
So we're
clarify.
talking about, yes.
Yes.
So the 309 closed cases, the 124 adoption approved, the attitudes, the discipline of the children, you all are pleased with them. That's what you all are saying.
Chair, through the chair, to clarify, there are 535 applications over the
Period,
8-year period.
identified,
Yes. Of that 535, 309 are called closed cases. When we say closed, we don't mean that we've closed off the case. We mean that these are cases where persons don't have a child in their care or don't know the child that they want to adopt. They've put in an application to get a child that's matched to them, right? However, to answer your questions about the number of adoption orders that we have gotten, meaning these are the children who the court has endorsed that an adoption can move forward. Yes, I can confirm that generally we do not have challenges with problematic behaviors, and where those natural, expectable concerns may arise, the adoption unit does provide a level of support that we mentioned earlier to help the adoptive parents navigate those challenges.
So from your statement, people or persons, individuals, provide children for adoption, not as a result of indiscipline, not as a result of deviant behavior, not as a result of bad attitudes. Help me.
Through the chair, the majority of children who do come forward and are available for adoption, again, are the very young ones. So that's where the difference lies, in that we have a large population within the children that are in the system that do qualify with those types of behaviors, right? And many times they are placed before the court as children in need of supervision and so. But those are rarely the type of children that are within the pool of adoption, as I mentioned, because the pool of adoption tends to be currently the younger groups of children.
So therefore, it could be a social problem, an economical problem.
That's right, yes. It can be where parents are unable to provide care for their children, and so they've brought that child to be adopted. They do not have the necessary supports. It might be a very young mother who is pregnant, doesn't have the supports, doesn't have the means. Those tend to be generally the reasons why both parents present their children for adoption.
Average age group?
Of the parents?
The child. The average age group of the child. 2 years, 3 years, 6 months. Give the committee a little.
Through the chair, yes. Through the chair, a lot of times from birth, so both parents will come to us and indicate, I'm unable to care for this child. I know I'm not going to be able to care for this child, and as the child is born, I would like to place the child for adoption. So from birth, we do get 2 years, 3 years old, arising out of the community residences. The age ranges we have seen range from about 2 years to 16 years old.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Do we have cases of parents who take children to one of these care homes and are able subsequently to bring the children back home? And how do you achieve that?
Thank you, Chair, for that question. Yes, there are parents who present their children in those circumstances, or there may be children who the authority has had to remove from their care based on child protection concerns. But these parents have been working with the authority to access the kinds of resources and interventions that are needed to rehabilitate them. And so when we speak about permanency planning and really working towards family reintegration, this is the focus of the work that we're doing there, where we're trying to help the parent, perhaps if they need to get a job, if they need to up their skills so that they can get a job, if we need to network them with certain grants or other resources, material resources that would help them better provide a home for their child, if they themselves have issues of psychological issues that they need to work through, if they need parenting skills, all of these are interventions that the authority would be working with them on over time so that they can come to a place of being able to receive their child back into their care. And we have had stories of successful reintegrations.
And on the other side of that fence, the child who's taken from home, put into some kind of system, has a certain kind of experience, and then is going back home. What is the support? Is there special support for those children? I imagine one assumes there's support for all children, but the ones who come, and parent knows this is a child I sent, I'm fixing up myself and so on. Children can have experiences that make it very difficult to reintegrate. They may have anger issues from having been abandoned, and they may have endured experiences. What is the level of support in the children, for the children?
Okay, so Chair, what happens is that once a child is received into care, that child receives a psychosocial assessment, and they may receive other specialist assessments thereafter to be able to, first of all, identify their needs and what types of interventions they may require. Again, with the ultimate goal of the child's rehabilitation, but also working back towards that reintegration. So that child, during their time in care, will also receive psychological interventions, educational support, where there are issues with the family-based interventions with the child may also, and the parent may occur. We also maintain, where it is possible and in the best interest and appropriate for the child, supervised access and interactions, so that family bond is maintained. And we have the opportunity to see live how the interaction between child and parent looks and to work through those issues. So there are opportunities for individual work of the child, individual work at the parent level, but also joint work between both parties, so that when we place them back into the family home, they are better positioned than they were when they first came into care.
So is that an unusual situation where parents come and say, I can't manage right now, but I want to have you look after my child or children, but I want to have my children ultimately? Is that a normal or is this unusual? Because I'm going to ask the follow-up question to that, is whether those children should be in the general population, like a halfway house, for you to be looked after on your way back home.
We have a fair amount, I don't have a number to give you, but we have a fair amount of parents that would present in that way. But I would have to say that I think the majority of our cases, unfortunately, are not those. The majority of our cases would be the ones where we've received a report and there is a concern for child maltreatment. The authority has had to go in, investigate, and unfortunately remove that child from their parents' care. Now, that does not necessarily mean that the parent will be resistant to working with us. In many of those cases, the parent will cooperate. In some, they may not. And that is a reason why children remain in care for a very long time. But we do continue, whether a parent is willing or not, to give them the opportunity to work it through. And of course, we have the court as the final decision maker in terms of whether reintegration is indeed in the best interest of that child.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to go back to the issue with the multiple children, the siblings. Do you have parents lined up for these children? And do you think if it comes to a situation where you are not getting an adoptive parent to take the siblings together, what is the option that the unit has?
Thank you for that question. Through the chair, we do not have persons who are willing at this point in time to adopt older age groups. We do get it far and few in between, and we are presently processing some applications where persons have requested children with older age groups that fit into the categories that we have available. So once the process is completed and they have been successfully approved, we will approach them to obtain their views on adopting, these children from this age group. With regards to if there is no one that is found, I will ask my general manager to explain on that in terms of if they are split, etc.
Okay, through the chair. In all instances, we try our best to keep children together. It will always come back down to balancing what is in the best interest of the child, balancing the trauma of separation against the benefit of the permanent home. And again, that is a case-by-case analysis. We would not, especially where they're close siblings and they're living together and they've perhaps never been separated before. It will be based on the determination of a specialist who will assess the risk of the separation against the permanent home. Of course, we would want to ensure that both siblings are placed together, but we would not want one to hold back the other. But if it comes to that, placing them separately will be more detrimental to their well-being, then they may not proceed.
So, Chair, through you, could you share with us where these children are currently housed?
Unfortunately, we don't divulge the personal details of our children just because we always would want to protect their confidentiality as well.
It's not that I want the exact location, but it's
Yes.
whether they are in a
At community residences,
in a
yes.
right,
Yes,
thank you.
at community residences.
Explain to us the foster care, that foster care process, because you're saying that when a child is freed for adoption, based on your submission, the child moves into the foster care kind of arrangement until a parent is found. Just share with us how that is done, the process for that.
Okay, so there are two options. There may be children who are freed for adoption who will remain in a community residence, and then there will be another option where children who are freed for adoption but may be placed with a foster parent. And that is based on the availability of foster parents to provide care for this age, number of children, if it's a sibling group, the profile of the child as well too. So if it is a child or a sibling group that's placed in foster care, our regular foster care process will be triggered in that we have a monitoring system that exists in foster care where the child or children in foster care will benefit from home visits to the foster care provider to ensure that they are well adjusted. We will be following up on all of their interventions, all of their schooling. We will do school visits as well. We do announced and unannounced checks with the foster parents. And we also have a process where the foster care unit and the adoption unit will continue to co-manage the cases so that in the event that there is a match for the child, that child can easily transition from the foster care system into the adoption process. For the children who remain in the community residences, the adoption unit will do that same level of case management that I just described, but for the child in the community residence.
So I know this may not be directly under you, but Chair, if I'm permitted, do you have the information as to how many foster parents we have in Trinidad and Tobago? What is the cost attached to how is it paid for? Is it that Children's Authority pays the foster parents, and what is that cost to the state?
Okay. Yes, so currently we have 124 children in foster care. Within that number, 10 of them are in kinship foster care arrangements.
Okay.
And this is split around 98 foster care providers. 89 of those being traditional foster carers, 9 of those being kinship foster care providers. Your second part of the question?
So before you touch a second, for the public, could you again just share what's the difference between the regular foster parent and the kinship foster parent? And then the follow-up was, the question I'd ask is, what is the cost? What is the cost to the state? Is it that the state pays the foster parent per child, and what does that cost?
Yes, okay, thank you. Through the chair. The difference between traditional and kinship foster carers. So kinship foster carers are persons who are qualified in the legislation as a relative, and the different types of relatives, who wish to provide care for a child within their family. They know that child. They have been screened through the authorities' processes and are suitable to provide care for that child, and they would be considered a kinship foster care provider that receives support through the authority. A traditional foster carer is one who does not know the child. They put in an application with the authority with an interest to provide foster care. And so a child they will say, for example, that they are interested in providing foster care for a child within X age range, a male child, preferably a child of this religion. They will set out their criteria. They will go through an entire screening process as well. Once they are approved, they will be placed on the register of approved foster carers, and a child within the child care system can be placed with that foster care provider. It is not a child that's known to them or related to them.
Okay.
In terms of the cost, we have a foster care stipend, as I mentioned, that is paid to meet the needs of the child. And so that's important because it is not to be used on any other types of expenses of the foster carer, which is why we do a financial screening as part of our assessment process as well too. And that ranges from $2,000 for children between the ages of 0 to 17, all the way up to $5,000, depending on the special needs. There's a range.
And that's per month?
Per month, yes.
Okay. All right. If I'm allowed, Chair, I just want to segue very quickly into where I live, and that is Tobago. And and your footprint in Tobago, I think, member Ford is giving me some trouble here. Based on your submission, you say that the allocation of caseworkers in Tobago, presently when home visits and sensitization sessions are to be conducted in Tobago, adoption staff from Trinidad must travel to perform these duties. What are your adoption numbers or your adoption requests from Tobago, and do you have, out of your 9, any of your 9 from Tobago?
Through the chair, thank you for that question. So our Tobago cases, the numbers are pretty small. We have approximately, let's say, 5 cases from Tobago that we're working on. Some were recently approved. Out of the 9 children, they are all here in Trinidad. However, should a match be someone who is approved on our list from Tobago, that would be facilitated. We do have what we call interaction sessions, and it's facilitated here where they get to bond, the prospective adoptive parents get to bond with the child for the probationary period. Once they get to take that child into their care successfully, they will take the child to Tobago with them, and we will travel to facilitate the visits. Yes.
What is the frequency in terms of your adoption staff having to travel to Tobago?
Through the chair, probably 2 to 3 times per quarter, and this is to facilitate home visits, sensitization sessions.
Do you think that the Children's Authority office in Tobago, there's an adoption unit there? There isn't. Do you think it is feasible to have maybe 1 or 2 officers based in Tobago?
I know that my CEO may wish to speak further on the plans and our organizational structure, but we absolutely see a need for all permanency-based options to continue to expand, and there are plans in the org structure to have caseworkers specifically designated to work through foster care and adoption in Tobago.
Yes, and through your chair, as part of our new structure, we have an expanded Tobago office. So within the construct of that Tobago office, we will have persons whose focus it would be to deal with adoption issues in Tobago. So we would have an expanded office.
Okay.
And of course, we will continue to monitor. Depending on the numbers, then we will expand the resources as necessary.
So how many caseworkers, Chair, I guess to the CEO, how many caseworkers do you think would be required to improve the efficiency of the operation in Tobago, based on your org structure?
Well, based on the structure, we would imagine not more than about 3 at this point in time. But as I say, it is a moving target, and we will be reviewing and making determinations for any increases as necessary.
How soon do you expect to send out advertisements for caseworkers for Tobago?
Within
That-
this,
so that-
within this fiscal year.
So that subject to funding. Right, yeah, because you're looking at the, yeah, but member Ford, even if it is 5 cases, you leave that alone, 5 cases, you're talking about the expenditure for staff to travel to Tobago, and also that we require Tobago to be placed on as much equal footing as possible, so that if you could find staff in Tobago, you may just see the requirement blossom, because you now have staff dedicated to Tobago. So I'm hoping that this fiscal year ends when, Jack? This fiscal year ends in September.
Well, and of course, as we mentioned, there's increasing sensitization and awareness that we do through the media, including social media.
Right.
So it is a moving target, and as we said, that depending on the numbers that we see, then the requisite resources will be made
So
available.
as it stands now, based on the numbers that you have, as it stands now, you believe that 3 staff members
Not
would
more
be
than,
adequate.
not more
right,
than.
because-
And if we're talking caseworkers who would have more of a focus on adoption, I would say not more than 3 at this point in time. But it is
Well-
a moving target.
Right.
And of course, we have other needs on the island.
Right, so that's what I'm saying. If you could, and my suggestion, CEO, you have to find a weapon to pin down this moving target, right? Because if you could find caseworkers who can be cross, is that allowed in the authority, that you can have a caseworker who can work across, what do you call it, across
Like,
cross functions? Yes, that's
yes.
the terminology. So if you could
Yes.
find caseworkers that could work cross functions, then I think that will be very suitable to Tobago, based on the fact that we only have 5 cases, member Ford, but 5 cases is significant.
Well, I mean, definitely, as is being discussed, we have our Tobago operation, and we will ensure that all the requisite resources are in place.
Well, thank you, Chair. I think I could pause there for a minute.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Interesting discourse. I got a I just lost it here. My constituent. How is a child? I know the chairman had advised something similar. How is a child presented? Is it that the parent go to the authority and relinquish the child? I just got a text here from somebody who is tuning in. Could you just explain the situation, how the authority accepts a child?
Through the chair. So that is one option, one stream by which a child who is placed for adoption can come through to us. A birth parent can come forward and indicate that they are intending to have a child, or they currently do have a child, and they would like the child to be placed for adoption. That's one way. Another way is that we have children in the system right now. So as Ms. Neptune mentioned, we would look at the pool of children that are currently in community residences and in foster care to determine if they are candidates for adoption. And then we may also have where children may be at the hospital, and medical social workers and other health providers may bring to the authorities' attention these children as candidates for adoption as well.
Okay, so just to go back. How many children are in the care of the state in Trinidad? And I'm not talking about children who are sent by the court, but definitely, what's the total population? And the question that follows is, on what basis do you proceed to initiate an adoption, to clear children for adoption from that population?
Okay. Chair, we would have to give you the exact figure in a subsequent submission, but I would say that there would be under 800 children in total in the care of the state, and that would be a combination of children who are in community residences, in foster care, as well as at our reception centers, which are places of safety for children as well. In terms of when the process of adoption would kick in,
Not when, but what is the criteria that you select some and not others?
Right.
Is it that the parents say, no, or what?
yes.
Or they aged out, or they've come to an age that you don't think? How do you exercise that discretion?
During the course of our investigations and psychosocial assessments, our clinical assessments of these children, as well as our monitoring of these children, through all of these points of inquiry, we look at, does this child have a relative, a parent, a family member, interested person who can provide care for this child? And first and foremost, that is the primary criteria. If there are no options, and there are some children like that there is no person who is willing or able to provide care for that child, then adoption comes into the picture. There is also the situation where a parent or guardian will present themselves and say that they are willing to relinquish care and control of the child, and they wish for their child to be placed for adoption as well.
So how long is that process by which you determine whether this child has an option to adoption, which is within the family? How long are you prepared? And I ask that question because the length of time that a child might stay in the system might change that child and make that child even less attractive. The Judith Jones report, for example, did not paint a very good picture of homes that are under the Children's Authority's purview, as it were. So do you have some period within which that work must be done? Or the factors that will affect how long a child stays in a home before, knowing that the older children get, the less likely they are to find a home?
Chair, what I can say is that from the beginning of the authority's intervention, permanency planning is always at the forefront of our minds. And so from the point of investigation, we are looking at what is the permanent plan for this child, where is this child going to go? Once we have seen that there are options, that time frame can differ. It can differ for 3 months, 6 months, it could go a year, 2 years. But we have to see that a parent, a guardian, a relative is making efforts to be able to, do the interventions and collaborate in the best interest of the child. If from the beginning or during the process we have determined that there really are no options, from very early on, we can indicate this child is a candidate for adoption and refer that child to the adoption unit, who will continue to do the monitoring and do the work. The issue is the actual placement of the child for adoption. So the issue is less of identifying if adoption is the option, and more so, once we have done so, how long it takes for that child to then be matched with a family.
So do you have the resources at the Children's Authority to efficiently undergo that process?
Chair, there is need for improvement, and that is the reason why we're undergoing the transformational process and the revised organizational structure.
Does the revised organizational structure, I can't tell from that, does it call for bigger staff or more departments?
Chair, are we talking specific to the adoption unit?
Well, I think the point I'm making is the adoption is affected by the children who come into the system, and then what happens to them before you can get to the point of saying this child is eligible for first initiating the process to get this child cleared for adoption. So there are factors that influence. So I'm asking about that, and the impact that could have in improving a situation. The general public perception is that there are a lot of people who want to adopt children, and the information provided in terms of 9 children may suggest, well, the competition is too intense. I can't go in there looking for I'm never going to, and you could leave this session with people saying it's not never going to happen, it's too small. But I'm saying that the pool of children, there may be more children, but it may be that the process itself is so lengthy that you will always have just a few. And I'm wondering whether the transformation is going to make that more efficient in the general population to get to the adoption having more children who can get to a loving home quicker rather than later, or they age out.
Yes, well, the new structure calls for an increase in the staff numbers at the adoption unit. So we would expect an attendant increase in the level of efficiency in that area, yes.
And in the general population.
Yes.
And what are the, do we have quantifiable levels of improvement that are targets? Not with the number of children necessarily, but in terms of enhancement and service delivery from the Children's Authority. I heard mention, for example, of the initiatives that you're making for sensitization. What I don't hear is by what percentage do we expect, when you evaluate the feedback from the public in, say, foster care, that we've done this campaign and we see a 25% increase in people coming forward. It's one thing to talk about strategies, but the effectiveness must be measurable.
We would prefer to respond in writing with regard to the targets that are set.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. In your submission, Children's Authority, 2 children were removed from unsafe foster care conditions for the period 2018 to 2023. What were the circumstances that required the removal of these 2 children? And please indicate specific dates that the cases occurred and, well, what information you can give us that's public knowledge.
Through the chair, we would have had one situation of alleged sexual abuse and one situation of alleged physical abuse, and these would have occurred over the course of 2023.
And where are the children now?
The children have subsequently been removed, and they are with alternative providers, care providers.
And this is foster care. So this is a home, a particular home.
Foster care providers.
Foster care providers. And they receive subvention from the government?
A stipend, yes, for the
Right,
care of
and
the child.
Any alternative arrangement took place as a result? Any penalties, any taking off the list,
Yes.
written? You know, what transpired?
Through the chair, once we would have identified those cases, though and substantiated, at least from the perspective of the authority, those foster care providers have been removed from the register of approved foster care providers. Reports would have also been, of course, and that means stipends on all other forms of support end. And that also, the authority also provides reports to the police to conduct their follow-up criminal investigations.
And of course, the psychologist would have been involved with regards to these 2 children also.
Absolutely.
Right. The sexual aspect, in terms of what, the child was a female or male?
It was a female.
With charges, was there a criminal investigation into that matter?
The authority, Chair, did make a report to the police, and the police investigation, as far as we are aware, is ongoing.
Okay, so currently, we have a lot of reports of crime where children are left, their parents, a parent is killed, a single parent, it might be sometimes in both parents. I know that the authority goes in there, provides support. Are some of these children coming into the system, or in almost every case, or in most cases, would you say that they're taken by family and you can monitor their progress in that way?
Chair, in many cases, we are able to identify relatives and other persons who may be able to provide care for those children. In some cases, we may need to receive the child into care, but we have found that, particularly with those types of cases you've mentioned, yes, there may be other persons within the circle who can assume care and control of the children.
So would you say that crime is adding to the burdens of childcare, the state's burden of childcare?
Yes, I will agree with that.
Just, I think these may be my final two questions. In terms of your submission would have shared with us that the availability of psychologists to the unit, and this was in relation to what additional infrastructure is necessary to optimize the operations of the unit. And you shared with the committee that presently the unit operates with 2 external contracted psychological service providers. Could you share with us the cost to the unit, the cost to the state for those 2 externally contracted psychological service providers? And are they on a retainer, or is it that it is a case-by-case arrangement? And the same question applies also to your service provider, your external service provider for the background checks, in terms of the cost.
As I indicated before, that we'll provide that in writing, so I will add the cost of the psychologist to that as well.
Okay, much appreciated. Thank you, Chair.
Going back to the question about crime, would you be able to provide us, maybe not now, the number of children who are victims of crime, their parents, losing their parents, that have had to be taken into state care because there's no one, no family relative to take care of them?
Yes, Chair, we'll seek to provide that information in writing.
Okay, thank you. A question about the birth certificate of children when they're adopted. What happens to their birth certificate? Do they immediately get what?
Through the chair. So once the adoption is granted, the original birth certificates for these children are sealed by the court, and once he or she turns 18, they can unseal it. Once the adoption is granted, the court order is sent to the Registrar General Department, and an adoption certificate will be generated where the names of the adoptive parents now appear on the child's birth certificates. By law, the child has to take the surname of the adoptive parents.
Okay, so that is the certificate that they will present to get into school and so on, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Are there conditions, if at that stage the parent is not yet ready, the adoptive parents is not yet ready to tell the child they're adopted, does the child have access to that? And is there confidentiality commitments that schools and so on must make?
Through the chair, with regards to if the children have access to their birth certificates, I know in open cases where there are older children, yes, they do have access. They know that they are adopted. With the younger ones, they do not. I can't speak directly for the adoptive parents if they allow the children to see. But in terms of the certificate itself, it just has it has certificate written on it. So whereas we would have certificate of birth written on the normal birth certificates, for the adoptive certificates, they just have certificate written on it in terms of confidentiality. With regards to the schools, we do inform of this one. We visit the schools to conduct our school visits for processing of cases. We do inform of the confidentiality. We speak directly with the principals as well as the school teachers. So there is that confidentiality.
So, but the people who know the minute they see something saying certificate as opposed to birth certificate, that this is an adopted child, right?
Yes, Chair.
Do state agents, like in hospitals where you have the nurses and staff and doctors and teachers and so on, do they have an obligation to maintain that confidentiality? Because the one thing you don't want, if you are not yet ready to tell your child that they're adopted, is a careless reference to a child. No wonder you come out so because, look, that's not your mother, whatever. Are there commitments that these people who have access to that information must maintain? Or is that something that ought to be written into some law?
Through the chair, we do hope, especially when we do our sensitizations with these agencies, we do speak on the importance of confidentiality with adoption. So we do hope that it is carried out, but again, as PS would have indicated, in terms of recommendations, we are open to that, and that would be something that is great, that is recommended, that persons throughout maintain this confidentiality, because as we tell the parents, they should be the ones to inform the children that he or she is adopted. Someone could easily, and we know how our communities are, someone could easily inform this child themselves that they are adopted.
Could it be seen as a child protection measure?
Yes, Chair.
I should ask it. Thanks, Madam Chair. In your submission on page 9, Children's Authority, right, you identify a 21-day period where somebody who would have made a request to adopt a child, right, you all have a 21-day period within to renege. But in your discourse, nowhere it's mentioned that, like, for example, if a child is in an adoptive home, and let's say there's a complaint with regards to the care of the child or the situation child, is there a time frame that you all will work within in order to get that child out of that home that would have been providing the adoption?
Through the chair, once the authority receives a report of a child protection concern of any child who is under our purview, and that case it is directed by our registry unit to the relevant caseworker, and investigation is commenced immediately. So our adoption unit, in the case of a child who is with an adoptive parent, our adoption unit will go out there and investigate the complaint with the view of substantiating or not.
On the severity of the complaint, you would know whether you need to move immediately to get the child out, or whether there'd be a time frame
That's
where
correct.
it can delay. Okay.
My last question, Chair. What's the life of the adoption committee that was just appointed in December 2023? What's the duration of that committee?
Well, the committee will be appointed for the duration of the board appointment itself. And the board appointment, I believe, is 3 years. Yeah, so it'll be for the life of the board.
3 years?
Yes.
Okay.
I noticed the response to the meetings of that committee were a bit evasive. The question was asked prior to your coming here, how often, how many meetings they'd had, and we were told they meet. So were you satisfied with the regularity with which the committee meets? I know there's a new committee, and previous to that, the committees.
Well, the committee meets on average once per month.
And
The
those have
adoption
always been
committee. Excuse?
except in
Yeah.
exceptional circumstances. they've
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Good, thank you. Okay, well, I'd like to thank Mr. Ganga Prasad and Mr. Cyrus and their respective teams for coming to us today, but, fairly your responses have been quite full. And so we really appreciate that. You have a good team there. And I'd like to invite each of you, starting with you, Mr. Ganga Prasad, to give us brief closing remarks.
Thanks very much, Chair. First and foremost, I want to thank you again for allowing this opportunity and for facilitating a very informative discussion. I recognize the value of it. Clearly, inside of the discussion, we see some opportunities to take some action to fill some gap, and we look forward to the outcome document and any recommendation and suggestion. We at the Gender and Child Affairs reaffirm our commitment to work with the Children's Authority and to support the Children's Authority in the work that they have to do, and with all stakeholders to ensure the well-being of children in our country. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Cyrus.
Yes, Chair, we wish to thank the committee for inviting us and giving us the opportunity to share on what is a very important aspect of our business. As we have been promoting, adoption is an option, and we continue to sensitize the public to all the facilities available at the Children's Authority. So we wish to thank you, and we look forward to any recommendations that are made, and we will take them on board. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. We will be inviting submissions from members of the public to get some of their experiences, their ideas, and so on, and incorporate that in our eventual report. And I'd like to thank all stakeholders, all of you, for attending and for sharing your invaluable knowledge with us and with the members of the public. I'd like to thank the committee members and the staff of the Office of Parliament for their usual efficient and very well done support work, as well as the listening and viewing audience. So thank you all and have a great day.